This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. Well, Tim, we have a great two-part episode that we're launching in part one today, where we interviewed Jon Pharris with CapRock Partners.
And I think it was a great episode. I'm excited for the audience to get to listen to both parts of this. Jon's an incredible guy, and it just aligns so well with a lot of what we've talked about in the podcast, which is business success, real estate, but then also ultimate meaning in our families, our marriages, our faith, being generous and giving back. And so looking forward to the audience getting to hear this conversation.
Yeah, I think in this first part, he's going to get into a lot of the formation of CapRock and his background. And when he talks about the GFC, I just think you can really just feel what he had to go through and what CapRock was based off of and what it had to go through, just the challenges and the hurdles. And so that really spoke to me just because that's such a foundational aspect of where you and David started in the business. And so, yeah, it's going to be a great episode. Check it out here. Welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. Today we have a guest with us here in the Dallas office, Jon Pharris of CapRock Partners. Jon, it's good to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Tim, joining us from Houston. I think this is one of the first times you've gotten to talk to Jon, so this is going to be a fun interview today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you, Jon. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Should be great.
Jon, why don't we start just for the audience that doesn't know you or CapRock, just quick background on CapRock Partners, what you guys do, kind of the space you're in, and just high level. We'll get into it from a lot more depth here in a minute.
Okay. So CapRock Partners, I'm co-founder. We started it in the GFC in 2009, and all we focus on is industrial real estate. We raise a series of discretionary funds and invest and develop for industrial. Started the company in California, and now we invest everywhere west of the Rockies. About 4 or 5 years ago, moved from California to Texas. And so now we're active investing and developing industrial in Texas. We have about $3 billion in AUM. We've raised 8 funds overall, totaling about $2 billion of equity. We have about 45 team members in 3 offices, California, Arizona, and Texas.
Yeah, that's great. That's incredible. There's a lot there. So I thought it'd be good to talk about when you guys starting during the GFC, really interesting time. First, I was going to say just the way that we got connected was CapRock opening their Texas office. Mm-hmm. And I guess when did that happen? Was that 2023 or 2024?
I moved out in 2021, and I was flying solo in Texas for a while. So technically I would say we started in 2022, but first hires were really in 23 and 24, and now we have our team.
Okay.
Up here.
Yeah, I think we got connected with Taylor and then started working on deals with you guys, and have really enjoyed working with your team. You've hired some great people.
Yeah, it's a combination of hiring people is in and of itself a skill, because are you hiring for personality? Are you hiring for relationships? Are you hiring for technical skills? And I think it's really a blend of all of those, and it's really important to have somebody who, from Taylor Starnes leads our Texas office, and he is homegrown in Texas, but it's a great person, right? And that is what's, from a CapRock culture standpoint, we look for character, personality, and an overall cultural fit, much more so than just being a rainmaker.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, and I know the other connection we had, and I guess the way you and I met, because I first met Taylor and it was more on the business side, was mutual friend Jeff Gerhardt in the master's program, which started out in California, which is where your roots are. And so we'll get into that too.
Exactly. And a lot of touch points.
Yeah.
Now we're doing work together.
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
And on the podcast together. Yeah. So this is good. Well, why don't we start? Let's kind of go back to the beginning of your story, wherever you want to start that. But, I know you have a very impressive educational background as well. And so maybe we kind of start there. I grew up in California, right?
Yeah. My background, other than everything before moving to Texas, has been in California other than school. So born and raised in Southern California, and as a typical Southern Californian, loved the ocean, lived pretty close to it, and also was a water polo player and played that competitively. And that kind of defined a portion of my life up until 22 or so when I was playing at Princeton, playing on the junior national team as the captain, played on the B team for the U.S., never made the A team. So I was always kind of the number 3 or number 4 goalie nationally. And it was a great experience on that front, but that also allowed me to get into a great school on the East Coast. And I went there for the 4 years before realizing, once I graduated, I didn't want to be on the East Coast. I wanted to come back into the West Coast and now in Texas, but I wanted to focus on real estate. And competitively speaking, that is something that we really like at CapRock, is to try and find people who have that competitive spirit. Mm-hmm. And one of those ways is through athletics. And how can they balance athletics and academic experience? Because I think that actually turns people into leaders. Yeah. And that is, when you look at people at CapRock, there is a common theme of, did they play in sports in high school or in college, or do they do something that is also creative? And that's kind of a thread. I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but that is something that we look for people that are multidimensional. I think that's really important.
No, that's good. We've noticed that too on the brokerage side, very competitive business, the importance of having a competitive nature. And also, we try to do everything at DMRE from a team standpoint. It's really important that we collaborate. And we've found that people that were, successful within sports are a lot of times have that background of team and understand the importance of a team. It's not always the case, but versus those that have always been very individualistic, just self-focused, and just kind of stayed in their lane. We've hired a lot of former baseball players, football players, and them understanding you can't win the game by yourself. It takes everybody working together. And so that's been another aspect of athletes that we've seen that's been a big benefit for us too.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You can accomplish more as a team than you can as an individual. That carries so much weight across businesses, and it also helps to foster communication, collaboration, leadership, and those types of personalities seem to translate across different industries.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, what drew you to real estate? Because it's interesting you're talking about being on the East Coast and, wanting to kind of move into your career and then really being interested in starting in real estate. Was there sort of a draw there that kind of started that?
Well, growing up, I wanted to do two things, Wall Street and real estate. And I don't really know why exactly it was those two, but that was just where I thought my passions might be. And then as a intern, I worked at a Wall Street bank and realized that was not the cultural fit that I was looking for. And so just essentially cut Wall Street off of the list, even though now I interact kind of in the quote-unquote Wall Street world on raising capital and doing deals. But when that defaulted to just real estate, my senior year, I realized I wanted to have my own company, kind of my personality. And so at Princeton, there's no business major. Everything is liberal arts. So my senior thesis, I wrote on the development of Southern California post-World War II and more or less self-taught myself the development patterns, the trends for Southern California, because I thought that's where I was going to live. So focused on different aspects since World War II for essentially 50 years. And that gave me a great background to go into real estate. And then I'd say I was one of the only people that I graduated with that didn't have a job right upon graduation, because I didn't want to go to DC, didn't want to go to New York, didn't want to work at an iBank, didn't want to work at a consulting firm. So I just drove cross country and got a job, and everyone thought I was crazy because I was saying I was going to go into real estate. And at that time, especially at that school, nobody really went into real estate. And so I just charted my own path and said, this is what I want to do, and I'm just going to go and figure it out. And then I started as an industrial real estate broker in Orange County, selling and leasing around the John Wayne Airport area, and had great success doing that. But my goal was to be on the principal side. So after a few years of being a broker, I went to USC and got my master's in real estate development. And then upon graduating there, I worked at a value add company, buying and repositioning in mostly industrial buildings, and then wanted to work at a developer. So I actually went through an interview process, got hired away by a developer the first day that he opened his doors. And that was an amazing run. So there I was a development manager focused on the Inland Empire, buying land, entitling buildings, building the buildings. And then the world stopped when the GFC hit. And at that point, I was 29 years old, essentially totally broke because you're still starting your careers. Yeah. I had 2 kids. I had a house and a mortgage, and the world was upside down. And what a great time to start a company. So that's essentially when I was 29 when Pat and I started CapRock Partners.
Wow. And so backing up a little bit from there, where did you meet your wife? And then when did you get married, kind of in between cross country, USC, starting development and all that?
So I was fortunate to meet Ashley, my wife. We've been married for 23 years, and we met when we were 20 and dated for a few years. She went to USC. I was at Princeton, kind of a little bit of a humorous personal story. She was roommates with my female cousin. They were sorority sisters, and I was living one summer up in LA playing water polo at USC, and they were roommates. And the first day that I moved up to LA, my place didn't have air conditioning. My cousins did, and her roommate was Ashley, my now wife. And we met one day, the first day I moved up there, and started dating kind of immediately, and that was it.
Wow. So she fell in love with the water polo player, the number 3 goalie in the country.
So, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's been a total blessing.
Yeah.
Really. I've been married for 23 years. We now have 4 kids, kind of every 2 years. So someone's in college, a couple in high school, and then one in junior high. And we've been able to raise them as well as possible. And I'm really excited about who they're turning out to be and the quality of the people and the character that they have and their friends. And that was one of an amazing blessing of moving to Texas 4 or 5 years ago and continuing to see them absolutely thrive.
That's awesome. And one of the reasons I wanted you to back up and talk about your wife was just when you started CapRock Partners, obviously that's a decision you're making with your business partner, but your wife's involved in that too. And so what was her reaction to the world stopping? It's a very difficult time, and you have two young kids. Mm-hmm. It just kind of like a little window into what that was like. Well,
when you fast forward things to what does it look like in 2025, almost 2026, and you can say there's been a period of success from a business standpoint, but you got to put yourself back in the frame of what was it like in the GFC, and maybe some of the listeners or audience doesn't even really understand how significant that was. But essentially, it's the second worst economic depression in the last 100 years. And in real estate, it's probably almost on par with the depression because everything stopped, especially if you were a developer, which is the role that I was at the time. And then on top of that, being really young, being 29 years old and not having any kind of fallback because you're just starting your family, starting a career. Everybody who's in the 20s knows what that's like. And then compounded, I had the 2 kids and a mortgage, and everything was completely upside down. And then we also just tried to figure out how to make ends work. So while starting CapRock, we were also doing side hustles and starting other businesses together. And just, we don't need to go into that, but you're on an entrepreneurial stage and you're not sure what is going to work. And my background was in real estate, but you also had to put the proverbial food on the table, literally, at that time. And we had to move out of our house because we couldn't pay the mortgage. So we had to rent it out, and then we had to move into an apartment. And we had 2 kids at the time, and we were getting pregnant with our third one, and it was completely stressful. So it's somewhat humorous to fast forward 16, 17 years and say, well, in a certain aspect, CapRock made it, but going back to the stresses that were at that time, and you're burning the candle at both ends, you have no idea if CapRock is going to work. You're doing everything that you can, but then that also takes a personal toll. It also takes a family toll, and then add on, there's really instances where you couldn't make ends meet on a weekly or monthly basis, and everything was absolutely magnified. And I think that sometimes any entrepreneurial story, whether it's your alls or ours or others, when some monetary success might happen, people in the world kind of look at that and be like, oh, it was so easy. Or they figured it out, or they had all the doors open to them, or anything along those lines. And that's nearly never the case. And people forget about the hardships and the resilience and the life lessons that teaches you. And one of the things personally that I try and do is explain that to my kids. Right? My older ones experienced it. They very vividly remember moving out of the house, moving into an apartment, trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and family members sometimes literally paying for diapers right when we started the company. And they remember that, but then my to younger ones don't have as vivid of a memory. So having those conversations about the importance of family, the importance of grit, the importance of resilience, and every day getting up and just trying to make things work. But it's not up to just the individual, right? And from my faith perspective, right, there's a lot of a prayer that goes into it, and a lot of trying to follow where God is leading or where we think he might be leading us, and to follow that in faith. And you can look back at many, many markers within CapRock or within my 46 years, and you can see where God has kind of, in my views, absolutely stepped in and either opened doors or closed doors. And that was a decision also, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, about 4 or 5 years ago, we were at a juncture, at a decision point, saying, should we move to Texas as a family, which seems completely irrational. I was born in Southern California, lived pretty close to the beach. Most people have said, hey, that's the exact spot to be. And there was this constant for several months, and Ashley, my wife, would say a year, that something was missing, that we were supposed to be moving, but we didn't know what that was, so we were open to it. And it was really, I often say that there was lots of factors that went into the decision to move to Texas, because that's not to be taken lightly, to move your family, to move your portions of your company. But to a certain extent, we also feel like God moved our cloud. And it was like, hey, you had 40 plus years in California generally, but that's not the chapter of your life anymore. I am leading you somewhere else. And part of it's like, well, why? And why are we moving to Texas? And that doesn't seem like that's the logical step, but that was the faith journey that we're on. And you look back 4 or 5 years, total blessing. Couldn't imagine still being in California. So thankful from a business standpoint, from a faith standpoint, from a family standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, that we're in Texas.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing you guys made that decision. It must have been really hard with the age your kids are at, because they were probably junior high. Was your oldest in junior high or early high school at that point? But having to uproot and leave friends, and that's a tough, I'm sure that was a tough family decision, to do that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. My oldest was going into high school when we decided to move. So not only was the move just culturally different, and anytime you move your family, whether that's a couple counties away or a couple states away, it's a significant event. And then couple that with moving right when you start high school.
Yeah.
Right. That is a very significant decision to be made. And at that point, it's a collaboration. You have to explain why and hope that your whole family buys in. But at the end of the day, you're still leading the family and doing it in prayer, and you have to make that decision. But the first year was a bit of a challenge for all of them, just culturally and getting friends and just all the normal things that you would expect. And maybe 6 to 12 months after the move, everybody was so thankful. And so that is very thankful about that.
Yeah, that feels good as a parent.
Exactly.
That feels really
they have
good.
great friends. They have a great school. They're into their sports. So that part's important.
Going back to the GFC briefly, because I experienced that as a land broker in Texas, and you're right, it was really about survival. And listening to you talk, just hearing that, it was about getting through each day and each week. And looking back, we know it was a defined period of time, and then things came back and recovered, and there was opportunity. But when you were sitting in the middle of it, it felt like it was never going to come back. There were never going to be deals again. Everything was going to be dead, especially on the land and development side. There was no capital for deals. There was a ton of foreclosures. And so, it just sounds like for you, that was such a formative time, that really did lead to a lot of your success later on, because going through something so hard and, for your family and your marriage, but also from a business perspective, persevering through that and the strength that built in you. Maybe if you could speak to that real quick, just because I think when you go through being an entrepreneur and going through business, there's always all these challenges. And when you've kind of been through the fire like you have, you're able to weather those things and have perspective that you wouldn't have had you not, gone through that difficult time in the GFC.
Well, those are great points. I think an important personality trait of any entrepreneur is resilience and grit, and being able to withstand bad outcomes and being told no a lot. And brokers experience that all the time too. I would put them brokers or entrepreneurs by their nature, and being able to have an optimistic attitude and being able to realize that tomorrow is another day. But in order to be successful, you have to do all the right things, and you have to put one foot in front of the other, and you have to make the calls. You have to knock on the proverbial doors. You also have to think, because to excel in a very competitive environment that we are all in, you have to constantly be thinking one step ahead of the next person. That is one way that you separate yourselves or your company. And it's just constantly thinking, what is the next thing? How can I be one step ahead? And even when you get told no 100 times in a day, how do you get up the next day and say, all right, today's a new day. We're going to make it happen right now. Yeah. The other thing that the GFC and going through that experience taught me is all the things that the world puts out there as really important, right? You have a certain house, you have a certain bank account, you drive a certain car. It's totally meaningless, right? Yeah. All of those can be taken away in a flash. And when really bad economic times happen, you see the people that build their reputation or their foundation on the wrong things and how impersonally impactful that is. And all of a sudden their net worth goes from something to something less, and they think that's the end of the world. And when you start with or have that experience of being in a huge downturn like that, and you realize that those things don't matter. What matters is friendships, faith, family, and really what are you going to build your life upon? Because all these things will fade. And if you just put all your trust in a bank account, like a lot of businesses tend to do, or people in this environment do, that's going to lead to bad outcomes. And you can't control if you're going to make a deal, you're going to make a sale. But what you can control to a pretty large degree is who are you as a person? What are your role? Who are your role models? Who do you want to become? What is the main focus of your life? And if it's just business, you're only looking at one small aspect of things. Like when we talk about things at CapRock and we talk about it with our family, we want to be building the whole person. So yes, we're in business to make dollars, to make a profit, to provide for our investors, to provide for our family. Never get away from that, because that's what business is for. But in addition to that, it's about making an impact on the world from our faith perspective. I'm a Christian. It's also making an impact on the kingdom. And CapRock now has been blessed with a certain platform, and it's our obligation, in my view, to give back in many ways. And so that could be giving back to the team and helping build them up, and could be to use the financial resources to better ministries. It could be just being out in the church and saying there's way more than just focusing on business. There's a lot of different aspects that are required to make a well-rounded individual, and we want to be able to help shape those people. And so when CapRock started, again, 16, 17 years ago, when we had absolutely no money and we had no idea if CapRock was going to work, we created the CapRock Giving Foundation with the goal that at some point we should have some profits, and we wanted to make sure that hardwired into the company, we had essentially a tithing mechanism within the company. And at the outset, it kind of seemed silly. It's like, you have no money. What are you going to give? You can't even pay your rent. Things like that. But you had a vision for what CapRock could be, and that there was going to be financial success. And what is the point of that financial success? Well, one aspect of that is giving back into the community. So we created the CapRock Giving Foundation, and now we have been blessed to give away millions of dollars over the years to charities, to nonprofits, to ministries. And now we're starting an annual trip for our team to actually get your hands dirty. So this summer we're going to Costa Rica, and we're going to be handing out wheelchairs with a group that we support called Free Wheelchair Mission. So I'm going into that background because we don't just focus only on business. We focus on how can the business make an impact. And for us, it's a kingdom impact, because our who Pat and I are as Christians, but it's also, if you're not in that faith tradition, you still need to be looking at who are you as a person, what are you putting your value in, and there is so much more to life than just putting dollars in a bank account.
Yeah, that's good. As you were talking, I was reminded something that you guys did that I thought was really neat was last Christmas, you guys sent a card that basically said, you guys made a donation in our name to, I think it was Free Wheelchair Mission, which I thought was such a neat thing to do. You guys are supporting these different ministries. That's a really impactful ministry in what they're doing. But then also you're influencing others by sending that out. And, instead of just getting a card or I've gotten some kind of like really random Christmas gifts from people over the years from clients, like a maple tree root and, like all kinds of stuff. But getting that meant a lot more to me than just like getting a gift. Knowing that you guys are out with the profits you guys are setting aside funds to go support those causes. So I thought that was really neat, because how would I know you guys are doing that? And it's encouraging. Tim and I and David, we've done something similar with our nonprofit, and just trying to get that word out there so more and more people are thinking that way and doing it. Not from the standpoint of look at what we're doing, more from the standpoint of look at what we can do. Like you're saying, if we're thinking beyond just business, we're thinking about impact and influence, and not just building our own kingdom, but how can God's blessings to us overflow to other people, and can we bless other people? So that was great. I was going to ask if you could back up into that story. You mentioned before we started that you went through the master's program at 25. So would that have been like before USC or after USC or during it? But that was before the company. So I'm kind of interested how going through that, if there's anything you took away from that had an impact on starting your own firm. And then even just a lot of what we're talking about is the master's program is about creating margin in your life, going from success to significance, thinking about yourself as a whole person. So do you want to kind of speak to how that had an impact on what we're talking about?
Sure. So the master's program is a Christian 3-year program that really started in California and then has spread into more national, and now it's also in Texas. And it is like I said, a 3-year program that really focuses on the entire individual in every sphere of your life, family, ministry, business, and personal, and then subsets within that. So I went through that at 25, and it's mainly geared for people who are professionals, and kind of started for somebody who might be at their midpoint to say, well, I did business for a while and I'm going to transition into something else. What is that something else? And what are my gifts? And how can I use those gifts primarily for a kingdom purpose? I did it a little bit differently because I was 25 years old and I was completely
just getting started.
I was a newbie.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I didn't know. And I just heard about the master's program from being in the Christian community in Orange County, knew the family, knew the founder, a gentleman named Bob Shank. And I just felt a need to go into that program because it's a whole different training ground, and it really forms your mind, and it really develops a different philosophy than what Orange County specifically and Newport Beach was always saying. And that felt very compelling to me. And through the 3 years of the master's program, you do get a vision for some of your skills, your strengths, how you might be able to make an impact on the kingdom. And as a result of the master's program, that is the fundamental decision why we set up the CapRock Giving Fund right when we started the company, so that we had a way to structurally give back monetarily. Because even now, my focus primarily is on growing the business, because I think that is the stage of life that I am in, and that is what I am called to do right now. Does that mean that's my same calling in 10 years or 15 years? Probably not, but I don't know. But I'm going to be faithful in the period of life that I'm at right now, and I'm going to do whatever I can to take advantage of the opportunities that God puts in front of me and the doors that He opens, with the vision for the future. And I also want to hold everything with very open hands, because, as we said 5 minutes ago, if you just build your importance and your faith and your foundation on the wrong things and on money and cars and what the world says, it's going to be a bad outcome, because that is a false foundation. And so we always try and hold things with open hands right now, because honestly, it could all be taken away. What if there's another GFC that happens that nobody controlled, nobody sees coming, another black swan event? You have to be faithful in the period that you are at, in the area that you are at, but you also have to hold things with open hands in my mind, because it could change.
And that's good. It's neat to hear your story and the similarities of, I went through the master's program at 25. Tim, you were probably a similar age.
Probably 26, 27 when I went through it. And it was the same thing. I mean, back then everybody was 50 in the group, and I was half their age. But I thought it was so beneficial to learn those principles at the beginning of my career and in the beginning of my family to try and start applying them early versus a lot of the guys that I was in there with who are like, man, I wish I would have known this stuff. I wish I would have been working on these principles in my marriage or my family or my business, 20 years ago. And so it was really impactful for me, and it was for you too, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, it's neat to see how God was working. We both were part of it in Texas when Bob was still kind of flying in and leading groups in Texas. And I did it because of Tim had done it and told me how impactful it was. And then we started our nonprofit out of the master's program after David finished it. So all three of us who started our company went through the program. But it's not like at the end of the master's program, they're like, no, you need to start a nonprofit. But we both did something very similar, but it wasn't because they said you need to do this. It was just the way that God moved through the situation. And we've been so blessed. I think with the two things we've talked about, the GFC, I came into real estate in 2012, so right after all that. I was fortunate to be in college at that time, hearing all the bad news, But Tim and David lived it, and that's the best foundation we ever could have had for a firm, because when we start our own firm, just the decisions we've made, always trying to be debt-free, always trying to be conservative, always not afraid of the Black Swan event, but just knowing that brokerage is a very cyclical business. Texas tends to be a cyclical market, especially Houston, where we were.
Yeah.
That foundation, had we not had that foundation, it would be a very different company. And so that's just in the root of who we are, to say it's going to take grit, it's going to take hard work. Nothing really does come easy. I mean, God will always provide, but we have to show up and work hard. That's the nature of the game here that we're in. And then having the generosity at the same time to say, so we're not going to be so afraid of times being bad that we're going to hold on to everything. We're going to say we're going to be generous, because God is the one that ultimately is blessing the success, and we're going to continue to be generous and try to raise that generosity over time. And so I think that for me, and I think for both Tim and I, the master's program was a big part of that, like, mind shift to think, get less of a scarcity mindset, more of the mindset of, I think we know living in Texas, being in real estate, if we kind of do things the right way, we're probably going to be successful, but that's not really what matters. It's like, what are we going to do with the success? So instead of being afraid about not being successful, let's start thinking about how we can have positive influence and be significant. So that it was very, very foundational for Tim and I.
Yeah. And we had the similar experience, which is why now Texas, I'm on my 5th year here, and we're looking at getting something called the Barnabas Group relaunched in the greater DFW area. My understanding is that the Barnabas Group, which I'll talk about in just a second, was active in DFW, and then during COVID, it kind of faded away, and seems like now there could be an opportunity to relaunch it. So I'm putting some effort and some resources behind relaunching the Barnabas Group for DFW. And for those that aren't aware of the Barnabas Group, it comes out of the gentleman Barnabas, who is the supporter of Paul in the Gospels, and Barnabas does not play too large of a role in Acts, but he is the supporter of Paul, and he provides resources to Paul, and that's where the name Barnabas Group stems from. And what Barnabas Group is intended to do is to support nonprofits and ministries, but it's not to support them financially as much as it is to say people in the Barnabas Group who support it are oftentimes business leaders, or maybe they're running larger nonprofits who have, quote unquote, been there, done that, and have a desire to give back, sometimes financially, but more in terms of resources and thought and experience and strategy, and getting involved with ministries and nonprofit besides just writing a check. And it's been very impactful in Orange County. It was an offshoot of the master's program. It's people who went through the master's program started Barnabas Group in Southern California. And then Barnabas Group has now been in various other cities nationally. And I think there's a great opportunity to relaunch that in DFW. There's so many like-minded people in the greater Dallas area, and there's so many amazing ministries that are headquartered here. And then there's so many people who have great business acumen that can pour into these nonprofits, but they don't even have an avenue in which to do so. So relaunching the Barnabas Group and kind of an outshoot of the master's program here in DFW, I think is going to be really impactful in 26, 27, 28, and get some momentum going and really get like-minded people to see outside of business and how can they use their time and their talents, not just their treasure, into building up nonprofits and ministries so that there could be 10x, 100x impact.
Yeah, that's great. I think Tim and I were members of the Barnabas Group in Houston, and kind of before COVID. And what you're talking about, it's so powerful to get business leaders together in a room, meeting with nonprofits that you've never heard of. You don't know they exist. You don't know the incredible work they're doing. And then you have there would be issues presented that it wasn't the normal, like, we're trying to raise this much money. Everybody got your pocketbook, fill out the giving card, which is what most business owners are used to. Is like, we really just want you to come to this breakfast and give money. You don't need to do anything else. But it would be things like, we need legal help. We need help forming a board. We need help with, this specific issue. Does somebody know, how we can handle this insurance situation? It'd be a lot of that. And there was always somebody there in the room that was like, I'm an attorney, or you can talk to this person, or do you know about this other nonprofit that's doing the same work that you could collaborate with? And we thought that was so powerful because duplication's a real problem, and just really passionate people a lot of times that run these nonprofits that don't have the resources, not talking about money, just don't have the resources to know what to do, where to go. And Barnabas really provided that. So that was always really fun ministry to be a part of. It's exciting to hear that you're bringing it back. I think DFW is ripe for that.
Not to overstep, I'm not bringing it back. I'm helping
bring it back.
So there are other people who are way more at the forefront of it. I just am wanting to support it. I've had some experience with Barnabas Group just like you have, and we want to put effort and time and energy behind it so that it can be fruitful in the Dallas area.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Getting kind of back to the story, Tim, did you want to go back into any of that, or you want to kind of move forward?
I mean, the only comment I was going to make about the starting with the giving aspect, is that's the ultimate purpose. That's where meaning is. It's being used by God to help people and your financial resources, but also your skills and your leadership and the success in business to being used to help other people in your community and beyond your community. And it's so cool that I can understand where you're coming from when you're starting the giving fund before you've made any money. You don't even know if it's going to be successful. But it's also such a cool thing to be thinking that way from the beginning. And I think if you're not thinking that way from the beginning, you may never think that way. Because if you're always waiting to, once we make this much money, then we'll start giving, or once we get this level of success, then we'll start being intentional. And so I think it's really cool you guys started from the beginning with that foundation of generosity and giving back. I think it's really cool.
Yep. And then if you don't start that way, or you don't have that viewpoint, it is, as you said, very challenging to go back and try and recreate that thinking. But the other thing that tends to happen because of our sinful nature is that the goalposts keep on moving. Mm-hmm. Hey, you start with 0. When I get to X, I'm going to be so happy. I'm going to have everything that I want. Yeah. Then I can give back. And then you get to X, and you're like, that's not nearly enough. I can't give away. I need to have a bigger something, a bigger house, a bigger blah, blah, blah. And then X goes to, Y. And then, okay, I'll get to Y. I mean, that'll be enough. I'll have whatever it might be. And then you get to Y, and you look at the guy next to you, and you say, wait, he's got these things. Yeah. I need these things. And you start comparing, and you get on this silly treadmill that so many people are on. And to a certain extent, everybody who owns a business is on that treadmill. But you have to have an off-ramp, or you have to have a different vision in order to really say what is important, how can we give back. For people in business in general, I think greed is a very real thing. And you have to have motivations for making money in order to just get up and go through the grind. But if that is your only motivation, you will fall. You will fail. You will have other issues that might not be present to the outside world, but are present in your body, or maybe in your family, or whatever it might be. And one way to counteract that is, as the Bible says, is where your treasure is, your heart will be also. Is to intentionally give back, and to intentionally, as you were saying, be generous. And for us, it was through starting the CapRock Giving Fund, even when there was nothing to give away.
Yeah, that can be hard. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, for me, I've heard those voices in my head of like, well, if you didn't give away that money and you invested it, or if you did this, and is it really being, even though we spent a lot of time trying to invest in kingdom things that we feel like have great impact, there's still those voices that are like, you're right, you get to that level and you're not comparing yourself anymore at a lower level, you're always comparing yourself at a higher level. And these are the voices in your head. This is not the Lord that's telling you need to be worried about these things that don't matter, but it's so natural. Yeah. And so it's constantly going back to what are the priorities and what matters. And I think if we have a very temporal existence and we're really just focused about this life, it's going to be pretty easy to always be comparing and trying to get as high as we can. But since we all share the same, faith and believe that there is a next life that matters, and it matters what we do here for that next life, that like we're supposed to be using everything that we've been giving to God's glory at the end of the day, not to our own. But that's a constant challenge and battle that we fight, because pretty much everyone in the world that doesn't have that faith is saying the opposite. It's like, just try to get what you can now and don't worry about it. Just enjoy it and get what you can. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so CapRock Giving Fund is, I think, going to be more impactful than anything that CapRock does. And we have to have a vision for where we want to go and what we want to do. And I've said it before on this podcast, if all you're doing is trying to make money, I think it's a shallow aim. Mm-hmm. But if you have, I think our company rallies around the concepts of the Giving Fund and these charities that we support. And every year we have a contest with kids around the world, another organization that we support, where we're packing meals that they give out at refugee camps in third world countries, and creates a company culture that is really important. But the other thing that really gets me up every day is saying, well, yes, we're motivated to make profit for our investors, but the more we make in that arena of our life, the business arena, the more impact the CapRock Giving Fund is going to have. Mm-hmm. And I project out, 15, 20 years that's kind of my quote unquote working life, right? I'm 46 now, and 20 years, obviously you're 66. And I think that's going to have, the CapRock Giving Fund is going to have more impact than any building that we buy and reposition, any land that we buy and build buildings on. And that's the motivating factor. That is the true purpose of what CapRock is really designed for, besides making money for our investors, because if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be a business.
Yeah. No, that's good.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, that was a great first part interview with Jon. I'm excited for you guys to hear the second part and what we talked about. I think this first part, there's a lot that really spoke to both of us, Tim, especially just like I said at the beginning, the part about the GFC and just Jon's outlook and how intentional him and his business partner have been just with their culture at CapRock. And I'm still amazed that just with the success they'd had, that he would just pick up and move to an entirely different state. It really does show a lot of commitment to Texas, and he's going to get into that more. And I really felt the passion around that in this second part interview when he talked about just kind of going all in on Texas.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add. I love the focus on generosity. And when they had nothing and didn't know if their company would even make it, starting out with a giving fund and making that just a foundation of CapRock from the very early days, I thought was really cool.
Well, thank you for listening today. Definitely send us an email, texaslandguys@dmre.com. Follow us on LinkedIn. And we always love to hear from our audience. I think that we want to do more interviews like this. A lot of fun to have Jon on the podcast. And I think that for Tim and I, is a big part of why we do this, is just getting to talk to other leaders in the industry and learn from them and see also just where there's similarities. It's a lot of fun. So we'd love for you to follow us, send us a note, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.